In part two of the storm spotting process, it's actually step one in the day of life of a storm spotter, where you have to prepare. Is this a day where I may need to report information to the National Weather Service? There's a lot of different resources out there for you to be able to follow along with the potential for severe weather. But really, any day where you're checking things out, you can report to us. So the first step is just having a solid weather source. So having a professional weather source for weather information. The National Weather Service, whether you go somewhere else across the country, the weather.gov website is a great stopping point to get a lot of information depending on where you are in the United States. So throughout the U.S., there's 122 offices like ours here in Milwaukee. You can get a bunch of information from them on what we're assessing the severe weather threat is for that day. It's not perfect, and we try to nail down every situation as we can, but there's always a lot of different small things that can change how an event takes place. So just use the forecast as they are as a kind of guidance for a potential day for severe weather. Local TV meteorologists are another great source to follow along with and kind of gauge what they're saying from a severe weather standpoint. What timing are they giving for different localities and providing more play-by-play when severe weather does end up happening. So definitely check in with some of your favorite local TV meteorologists. Private sector, there's a lot of professional weather meteorologists that help out in the private sector that do very specialized forecasts, and those can help out with planning purposes as well. Technology, there's all kinds of ways you can get information now, so make sure that the source that you're using for that is legitimate. There's a lot of apps, wireless emergency alerts. Make sure that you haven't turned those off on your phone so that you get those, particularly if it's a time when you're busy and you're not paying attention to what's happening with the weather. Social media, we tend to post a lot of information to social media and giving our latest thoughts on what's happening with a weather event, and as well as online on our website, which we'll talk about in a little bit. TV and radio as well, they like to relay what the forecasts are going to be and watch for updates. We know that the forecast will change depending on the day and how close you are to the event. There's a lot of small things that can change that can either make it a more widespread severe weather event or potentially even less of a severe weather event. So just watch for updates and what we're kind of messaging as the day comes. Our website is weather.gov/Milwaukee. And this provides, as I mentioned, those 20 counties that we forecast for. We have a very high level of focus for what's happening in those 20 counties. We have one forecaster that's typically dedicated to just what's happening today and trying to provide hour by hour forecasts for today through tonight and into early tomorrow morning. So we have one person that does that, and another person that kind of keeps an eye on the extended portion, what we call day 2 through day 7. So there's a lot of details here. There's an actual human that's involved with the forecast process here and what information you see online. So there's a lot of information here. One of the good stepping points would be the weather story. There's an image to the left of where the radar spot is there. And this is, if we're going to tell somebody, what's the one thing that's going on with the weather that we need to know about, here's what we're trying to graphically show what's happening there. So you can get a lot of information in one spot with the weather story. And sometimes there's multiple tabs that are open there for different types of things that are happening. If you go way down in the bottom left-hand side, there's a lot of different links there that are particularly helpful for storm spotters. There's a hazardous weather outlook, which we'll talk about, Skywarn. There's a bunch of spotter resources on that Skywarn link. You can see local storm reports as well. And then the other one that's probably of interest is this outlooks and submit a storm report. So if you mouse over this current hazards, you'll get submit a storm report, and you'll be able to see a lot of the things that we use here later on in our talk. So the Storm Prediction Center, they're a great tool for knowing what the risk is for severe thunderstorms. They are a group of the nation's best forecasters when it comes to severe weather. Their main job is to forecast across the United States what areas they think are most susceptible to severe weather that day, where the conditions coming together to be most likely that there's going to be severe weather, and what level is that severe weather going to be at. So we coordinate with them on those outlooks. They're mainly theirs, but if we think we have a higher concern, or maybe it's a little bit less of a concern, we talk with them and say, hey, maybe we can up things here. With the watch, they issue the watch, but we coordinate with them and any of the other neighboring offices that are involved in that watch issuance as well. So we work very closely with these forecasters in trying to get a handle on what kind of severe weather might occur on that particular day. So there's a bunch of severe thunderstorm, these SPC, the Storm Prediction Center severe thunderstorm risk outlooks are online. You can go to these links, and if you just kind of pause this video and type in those links into a web browser, you'll come up with them. We have them listed on our Skywarn and the severe weather page as well, summer page that we have. But basically, this is on a scale from 1 to 5. And at the lowest level of it, we're not expecting as widespread a severe weather or as intense severe weather. But as you go up the chart, anything from 2 to 5 can be a very bad day for us here in Wisconsin. Even the ones, sometimes if it gets a little bit more potent than what we had been forecasting. But really, when we start seeing that there's a slight risk for severe weather, I know that term doesn't really resonate with maybe there being a widespread severe weather potential, but when we get to that level, we're looking at extra staffing, who's going to be around to help out if the weather does turn severe during this setup. So just know that when we see that number 2 or slight risk, that we have a higher concern for the severe weather. Anything going up the scale here is going to get worse and worse, and we'll go through each step here. So typically, risk level is 0 out of 5 with what we call general thunderstorms. Typically with this, we're not expecting any sort of severe weather at all. Heavy rainfall, maybe some small hail or something like that. Maybe we get one storm that produces, like a quarter-sized hailstone. But generally, we don't have the ingredients there for any sort of severe weather or widespread severe weather. So on these days, we're not really expecting much, if any, severe weather. On a marginal risk day, so this would be a 1 out of 5, you could still have a warning or two that you put out, and maybe a storm or two that produce severe weather, maybe some hail or gusty winds, or maybe even a tornado, but it's not widespread and very localized type of a storm there that goes severe. So not completely out of the woods, but not really looking at a widespread event or where there'd probably be a watch. So just looking at very isolated type storms there. The next step up is a 2 out of 5. This is that slight risk that we talked about. And typically we expect to have much more widespread type of severe weather, potentially getting into a watch scenario, depending on how things come together. It's not guaranteed, but it could go either to a lower end or a higher end with a slight risk. You could have some pretty severe weather that occurs with this. This is pretty typical of maybe some more marginal type of a snow or a severe weather event. But you can see, like in this event here, where we had numerous wind reports. Each one of those blue dots is a report of severe winds that we had there. So pretty typical of a slight risk there to see something that widespread of severe weather. Now, there have been instances where a storm does get a little bit more enhanced than what we were expecting, and that was a case with the Tennessee tornadoes from last March. One storm ended up just going and going and going and going, and it produced this just devastation in the overnight hours from about the northwestern Tennessee through the northern part of the state there, right through Nashville, and then in Cookeville as well with an EF4 there. So you can get higher end tornadoes in those setups if things do develop a little bit more strongly than you're expecting. Next step up is an enhanced risk, so a 3 out of 5. We get a few of these per year in southern Wisconsin. You can see here all the blue dots. Again, much more widespread and numerous wind reports in those types of days. So the green dots there are hail reports, red dots, tornado reports further off into Minnesota. But next step up, more widespread, maybe higher up on the wind scale or tornado scale as well. So those are can be some pretty serious days when we have that level of severe weather. And then a moderate risk, again, very rare that we get to this level or the next step up at a high risk. 4 out of 5. You can see all the reports here. This was the Iowa to Illinois derecho that happened last August, and just devastation with an event like this. Either longer track tornadoes or derecho, big wind event expected on a day like this when you hit up to a moderate risk of severe weather. Last one is the high risk with Wisconsin. The last one was in 2007. This one kind of similar to that Nashville tornado, where there's one storm that went from all the way in, from northeastern Iowa all the way through northeastern Wisconsin, and produced some extremely large hail. There's a tornado track you can still see on satellite because of all the trees that this one tornado destroyed up by Wausau. So very much in the way of kind of your worst day if you're dealing with a moderate or high risk in those scenarios. So really got to be on guard for those types of days. Another resource is our local hazardous weather outlook. It's a little bit more in addition to what the Storm Prediction Center provides, but for a more local focus. So you can go to that website there, or there's a link on the bottom left-hand side of our page to the hazardous weather outlook. You'll get kind of a general idea of when the thunderstorms are going to be moving through and what level of severe weather we're expecting on these hazardous weather outlooks as well. So know the difference between a watch and a warning. There's a lot of confusion on the difference between a watch and a warning. The watch means that the ingredients are there that for something that could develop. The warning means that storm is there and you need to take shelter. So they both start with WA, so a lot of people get those confused. But what you need to know is just the difference between a watch and a warning. The watch, get prepared. You could have like 2 to 6 hours before those storms actually get in. But the goal is to let people know that the severe weather is possible, so that if you're in a facility like a hospital where you have to plan out for potential storms in 3 hours, or you have to kind of back off on some other things, you can get prepared and be ready for when those storms come in, so that you're not scrambling around trying to figure out what to do. Our criteria for a severe thunderstorm warning are winds over 58 miles per hour or hail about the size of a quarter or larger, which is about 1 inch if you measure it at its widest point or higher. So here's an example of a severe thunderstorm warning that we issued last year going into Milwaukee. We had some 78 mile per hour winds that ended up happening with this as the storm went through the airport at Mitchell Field. So severe thunderstorm warnings are something to be concerned about if we have those. Again, it can be for wind or hail or both, but it's not rated up based on if there's going to be heavy rain or if there's a lot of lightning. It's got to be the wind or the hail that we use to verify whether or not that was a severe thunderstorm or not. And you can look down on the bottom left-hand side of the warning itself, if you get the text, to see what level we're at. It's called an impact-based warning, so you can see what size hail are we potentially going to get here, and then what strength of winds are going to come with it as well. And is it possible we could have a quick spin up of a tornado, or is a storm kind of developing some sort of rotation with it that you could get a tornado that's developing there too? Tornado warning, this can either be radar indicated or we have a spotter that's reporting it to us. So this was a tornado warning we did last year for Walworth and Racine counties. No tornado ended up happening from this, but we had rotation on radar in a favorable spot, and we decided to issue tornado warning on it. Again, to try to get that lead time so that people can seek shelter before the tornado touches down on the ground. So thankfully no tornado on this one, but there are times where we'll issue a tornado warning and there won't be a tornado that occurs. Again, on the bottom left-hand side, you can see whether or not the tornado was radar indicated, if it's got a spotter that's seen it, and then also if there's hail. There'll also be different destruction tags if we ever get up to a higher level of a tornado warning. Flash flood's a little bit harder to give hard criteria for when we issue those, just because it depends on rainfall rates and the conditions that are in place before the rain occurs. So If you've been dry for a long time, the rainfall can soak into the ground a little bit more. If it's been wet, then perhaps the rain, won't be as impact, or maybe it will be more impactful. Again, if it's also falling over concrete areas, so like in an urban area, in like say Milwaukee or Madison or Janesville, there's nowhere for that water to go, so it runs off and creates some flooding issues. So this was a flash flood warning we did last year. That was Columbia County, quite a bit of flooding there. The first time we've gone with considerable for our flash flood damage threat because of the amount of rainfall that happened there and some of the water rescues that had to happen with that storm. So as I mentioned, just look at the bottom for that impact-based warnings for the different, we call them tags, tornado and flash flood warnings. Both of those, any of the tornado warnings will trigger the wireless emergency alerts. Flash flood warnings, it's got to be either considerable or the next step up. When we get severe thunderstorm warnings, an update, we think in July is when this is going to come out, but we have to see. Wireless emergency alerts are going to trigger for different hail sizes as well as winds as well. So we're planning on having that coming sometime later in 2021. These are the different levels. Against the severe thunderstorm warnings, the wheel level will be later on once that change gets implemented. But again, this is just so that we can talk about storms in a different way. If it's like a weak looking, maybe EF0 type tornado, or the rotation's not very strong, that's going to be our base or most common type of tornado warning that we issue. If it looks like a big wedge tornado that's going through a city, we're going to call it a catastrophic type tornado warning or tornado emergency to get people's attention to make sure that they're really in their shelter for this one. This is not one to mess around with. So if you have a weather radio, you've probably heard one of those really annoying noises, but that's to wake you up in the middle of the night in case there's severe weather. So how you receive warnings, there's a lot of different ways. We tell people it's a good thing to have multiple ways to receive warnings. Mobile phones, there's a lot of great apps you can download that will geolocate where you're at and give you warnings so that if say you're driving somewhere and you want to know if that warning's for you, your phone will tell you. The Weather Service doesn't have an app like that, but there's a lot of good ones out there that you can do and use that. So find one that you find can be helpful for you. Wireless emergency alerts, again, those are programmed into any of the newer type phones that you'll get those. Again, a lot of people we've talked to after a tornado said that's how they got notified of that there, so make sure you don't turn those off. No weather radios, as you just heard at the beginning here, was one of the great ways to be able to monitor what's happening by listening in on the weather radio. It's our own radio network where we can send our messages over that and alerts like that so that you hear that tornado warning's going off or severe thunderstorm warning. And you can put batteries in them so that if you're in your closet, you can listen in and hear the latest details on where that storm is and if the coast is clear. Watch your TV for as long as you can. Hopefully you have one in your shelter too, where if it's in your basement that you can kind of watch to hear what the TV meteorologists are saying about your area. Radio can help out as well. There's a lot of radio stations that have gone to doing programming during severe weather, so try to find those stations and come back to them when you know that there's some severe weather in the area. Sirens are for outdoor people. If you're out there doing stuff, it's not meant to wake you up in the middle of the night, but it's another source to be able to hear that there's a warning that's going out. But each municipality is different. Some don't have them, some do. So know what your local municipality has in terms of sirens. Our website, weather.gov/Milwaukee, will have warnings that show up on it. You can also follow along on our Twitter page, and there'll be automatic postings to that. We don't put them on our Facebook page just because the algorithm sometimes will kind of get messy with the order that it puts those warnings out on. So we don't want to confuse people like 3 days after a severe weather event that all of a sudden there's a tornado warning that shows up in your feed. So we only put those out on Twitter. We do not have an app. We do have a mobile page. So if you go to the web browser on a phone and go to mobile.weather.gov, you can bookmark that or save it to your homepage, home screen, and monitor the forecast for your area from there. Local TV stations have a lot of them have an app that you can download for free and use that to get latest updates. And then there's private weather company apps as well that you can use. The ones that we can recommend because they're government type based, FEMA has one where you can sign up per county. American Red Cross has a bunch of different ones as well that you can sign up for to get alerts and get information as well. You can also check with your county. Do a search for your county emergency management program. There's typically some counties that have a way for you to sign up for extra alerts. So some of them are called like Nixle or Red Alert. There's a lot of different options out there as well. So check in with your county emergency management and see if they have anything like that that you can sign up for as well. Oh, that's loud. So outdoor warning sirens. So again, these are meant for outdoor warning purposes. Know that they're not meant for you to be able to hear them indoors or wake you up at night. You can imagine if your windows are closed and your air conditioning is running, you might not hear these. So they're not meant to wake you up. So you need to have a different source for that. Also, hearing a siren, if you're out there doing something, use that as a signal to get inside and seek additional information. If it stops, it doesn't mean that the threat has ended. A lot of times these things will just cycle for like 30 seconds and then kick off once the tornado warning has gone off. So know that they're not going to continuously cycle and make noise for the whole 30 minutes or 45 minutes that a warning is out for a location. That would put a lot of stress on those sirens. And we do not activate the sirens. They're activated by city and county officials. So check in with your municipalities for what their reasoning or what they use as their criteria for triggering the sirens. Turn on your TV. We have a lot of great meteorologists here in Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, that will give you play-by-play on the storms that are happening there. So they are our main source for warning information. And if there's any tornado warnings, they're supposed to cut in and provide information for the area that they provide information for. So their DMA is what they'll call it. So a lot of these stations send that free weather apps as well. So this is a great spot to get information as the storms are coming in, to get a sense exactly for where that potential rotation is and what it's headed for. So don't call and complain about them cutting into your favorite TV program. It's a very important part of our warning process to get that information out. Okay, so something else you can do ahead of time, if you plan to be a mobile spotter, you can try to find some spotting locations near your house or where you live. Try to go upstream from your city. Try to find some spots that are kind of some, not high traffic areas off to the side of the road, so you're not parked in the middle of the lane. This is just an example of 3 different spots that I found around our office that would be ideal spotting locations. And I know how long it takes for me to get from the office to those spots and back. So that's something else you can kind of time out when you get to that spot. How long does it take you to get from that spot back to your location?